Okay, we're back paddling again. I had to take off my gloves and take off my skull cap. It's still a little chilly, but I was really starting to overheat. It's starting to warm up here. So we're coming up, just up at the bend here is our one curve on the line. Again, I just want to make note of the geographical change. So there's a pretty big contrast from where we kind of started near Robford, and kind of the geography and the vegetation. And so we were kind of more in an upland area. You saw lots of birch and poplar, a lot more deciduous trees. Here you can see that the majority of the trees are coniferous trees. You can see it's kind of very low and swampy. You see the occasional birch, like there's a birch growing in there. Lots of spruce, cedar, tamaracks. You can always tell the tamaracks because tamaracks are one of the few needle trees that actually drop their needles in the fall. They actually are very beautiful. They like these ones here. They turn a gorgeous shade of yellow in the fall time, and they're just absolutely gorgeous to see. So there's your geography lesson. There's the geography teacher in me. Okay, so while we have a minute here, let's do our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final sections in Canadian Northern's transcontinental ambitions. The Canadian Northern Company got their start in Manitoba in 1896, acquired some lines, built some lines, and then their first big project was to build a line from the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, to Winnipeg, and that was completed in 1902. And then they slowly started building lines all throughout the prairies. Were very successful at that. They started also building north from Toronto and eventually reaching into the Sudbury area. Now, eventually they realized that in order for the company to be successful, that they would need a transcontinental connection. Unfortunately, they were very, very reluctant, to say the least, to build the section between the Sudbury area, specifically Ruel, and Port Arthur. And the reason for that was because the construction was going to be very difficult and therefore very expensive. And so they looked at all kinds of different options, including running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific, and nothing really panned out. And so eventually their hand was forced and they had to build their own line. So again, construction began in 1911, and the last spike was driven on January 1st, so New Year's Day 1914. And so then the line opened for traffic in 1950. Now, unfortunately, construction on sections like this one and some of the sections in the mountains of British Columbia, and coupled with a lot of the financial issues of World War I, Canadian Northern basically was bankrupt by 1917. And so they basically had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And a year later, in 1918, they were forced to amalgamate, merge, whatever descriptor you want to use for that, with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines known as the Canadian Government Railways. And that merger produced Canadian National Railways. Just to interrupt myself here for a second, we can see we're going through the one big curve on the line here, and eventually it's going to straighten out again, and then there's one slight curve up ahead again. And so the nationalization process that started in 1918 was completed in 1923 following the absorption of the Grand Trunk lines. And so in 1923, the name of this line changed from the Nipigon Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway to the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And then it continued as such until 1960, when there was a big reorganization with Canadian National. They changed their name from Canadian National Railways, plural, to Canadian National Railway. They adopted their iconic worm logo, which they use today. And in this area, they merged two of the rail lines. So they merged the Dorion subdivision, this line, with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision. And so the entire line became the Kinghorn subdivision, running from Long Lac to, at the time, Port Arthur, now Thunder Bay. Okay, and so it continued until 2005, when service was discontinued. And then starting in 2008, they began pulling up the rails, and that process was complete by 2010. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hold up here for a minute, and we're into the next straight section, and we're going to continue kind of plugging our way along to the west. Okay, so resuming our westward journey here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip you ahead. We're going to pause again when we get just up ahead there. You can, I don't know if you can make it on the camera, but there's a patch of snow on the railway grade up there, so that's where we're going to hold up again. So just enjoy the scenery, enjoy the patches of snow and the brown grass and a little bit of sunshine that's out. All right, so we're coming up to kind of the biggest patch of snow that we have to deal with. You can see kind of it's in a shaded area, so it hasn't melted yet. I figure within probably by next weekend the snow will be gone. Kind of funny story, when I was riding outbound, so when I was heading east towards Robford, at one point I was pedaling, and as you can imagine, trying to pedal through the ballast here, through the rocks, is sometimes loud. And if you actually turn on your closed captioning for the video, sometimes it'll pick it up as applause, which I kind of find hilarious. So I'm being applauded in the video. Anyway, so I was pedaling and I could sort of hear something, and I'm like, what is that sound? And again, sometimes it's hard to hear over the tires crunching over the ballast, and I have to tread very, very carefully here as I'm slipping and sliding. And the sound's getting louder and louder and louder, and then I just happen to turn around and glance, and there's literally a half-ton truck right behind me. And you don't typically see trucks like that on the grade. I usually don't see anybody. If you watch these regularly, I don't typically see a lot of people on these explorations, and if I do, I'll see the odd person on an ATV or something like that, but not usually a truck. Okay, so we're going to pull up here for a second. We have to do a battery change, but basically in this area here, I looked again, couldn't find it. So around here is supposed to be the milepost 137 marker. Again, that is the mileage on the Kinghorn. And so for the original lines, that should be milepost 87.3. Okay, so let's swap out a battery and then we'll get going again to the west.